Good morning, everyone, and welcome to meeting number 20 of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. A special welcome to MP Shanahan for joining us today. As was noted, I think that we still refer to the table at the end of our reports as the Shanahan table, so that is a legacy of yours for your time on this committee. And I concur with you. It's an excellent committee so far. I'm new to this committee, but so far it has been a joy being on this committee, certainly with our colleagues and the support that we have. Having been a member for 12 years, I would say that we have a really tremendous public service that serves us in our committees. They do great work. The committee is meeting in public today to study report number 4, Oversight of Government of Canada Advertisings of the 2019 spring reports of the Auditor General of Canada. And as you are all aware, today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of January 25th, 2021. And therefore, members may be attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. However, I do know that everybody is joining us virtually today. And I do want to thank all of our witnesses. You were all online and tested well ahead of time, and that is very helpful for our meeting, so thank you. So just a few reminders for our members. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor English or French. Before speaking, click on the microphone icon to activate your own mic. Otherwise, you will owe Matt Green some money. And when you are done speaking, please put your mic on mute to minimize any interference. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. And unless there are exceptional circumstances, the use of headsets with a boom microphone is mandatory for everyone participating remotely. And should any technical challenges arise, as we've seen even at the beginning of this meeting, please do advise me. And note that we may need to take a few minutes and suspend in order to ensure that all members are able to participate fully. I'd now like to welcome our witnesses. Joining us today from the Office of the Auditor General are Andrew Hayes, Deputy Auditor General, and Michelle Salvin, Principal. From the Department of Public Works and Government Services, Bill Matthews. Welcome, Mr. Matthews. Deputy Minister, and Jean-Pierre Blais, Assistant Deputy Minister, Receiver General and Pensions Branch. And from the Treasury Board Secretariat, Peter Wallace, Secretary of the Treasury Board of Canada, and Kelly Acton, Assistant Secretary, Strategic Communications and Ministerial Affairs. Welcome all, and I will now turn the floor over to Mr. Hayes for 5 minutes.
Madam Chair, thank you for this opportunity to discuss our report on the oversight of Government of Canada advertising. This report was tabled in Parliament in May 2019. Joining me today is Michelle Salvin, who is responsible for the audit. The Government of Canada uses communications to inform the public of its programs and services. A message is considered advertising when the government pays to place it either in traditional media, such as newspapers, television, radio, or billboards, or in digital media, such as websites or social media platforms. In 2016, the Government of Canada introduced in its Policy on Communications and Federal Identity a definition of nonpartisan communications that includes advertising. The government also put in place the requirement that all advertising campaigns with a budget of more than $500,000 would be subject to an external review for nonpartisanship as assessed against a set of criteria that has been specified. Our audit focused on whether the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat and Public Services and Procurement Canada were ensuring that the government's commitment to nonpartisan advertising was being met. Overall, in our view, the government's oversight of advertising was not sufficiently robust to ensure that no public funds were spent on partisan advertising. The Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat did not assess risks beyond cost when it set out the external review process for campaigns with budgets exceeding $500,000. In other words, the threshold was based on just the value of the campaign, and the Secretariat did not consider other important risk factors, such as the campaign's audience reach or topic. For example, a campaign can cost little but carry more risk because it focuses on a politically sensitive topic, like medical assistance in dying, while an extensive information campaign on a neutral topic, such as hand washing, will cost much more but be less likely to involve political coloring. We also found that the Secretariat did not monitor the quality of the external reviews conducted by Ad Standards, the not-for-profit organization mandated by the Secretariat to conduct the reviews. In reviewing files provided by the Secretariat, we found little evidence of the analysis conducted to support the assessment of campaigns against criteria. This gap in monitoring means that the Secretariat may have missed opportunities to identify and rectify weaknesses in the oversight process. Service Public et Approvisionnement Canada,
Public Services and Procurement Canada reviews campaigns that fall below the $500,000 threshold to ensure that they comply with policy and legislative requirements, including those for nonpartisanship. We found little evidence that the department conducted consistent and thorough reviews against all nonpartisanship criteria. For example, we found no indication that reviewers took steps to confirm that statements and statistics presented in campaigns were factual, even though the government's policy on communications and federal identity sets out that nonpartisan communications are to be objective, factual, and explanatory. We made 5 recommendations to the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat and 1 to Public Services and Procurement Canada. Both organizations agreed with our recommendations and prepared action plans. According to the timelines set out in these plans, all our recommendations should have been addressed at this time. Although we have not conducted additional audit work since 2019, I do want to note that some changes have been made to the external review process. For example, the threshold for sending a campaign for external review has been lowered to $250,000. The committee may wish to ask the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat whether its analysis of risk factors other than cost have led to other changes to the process. Since our audit was completed, the government's website shows that more than 50 additional campaigns underwent a mandatory external review, including those related to the COVID-19 pandemic. We also note that review results posted since our audit identify more instances of non-compliance with criteria such as accuracy, factualness, and objectivity. We take these results to be an indication of the positive impact of our work. Madam Chair, this concludes my opening remarks. We would be pleased to answer any question the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hayes. And we will now move on to Mr. Matthews for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, members. And thank you for the invitation to be with you here today to discuss the Auditor General's spring report from 2019 on oversight of Government of Canada advertising. Today, I am pleased to provide an update on the actions taken by PSPC in response to the Auditor General's recommendation that pertains to our department. As the Chair already mentioned, I have with me Mr. Jean-Pierre Blais.
rappel au règlement, on n'a pas d'interprétation, aucune traduction pour M. Matthews présentement.
My apologies. Can you repeat that, Mr. Blanchette-Jonca?
There's no interpretation. We're checking it.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, shall I just pause? Pause,
Yes,
sorry,
please.
Pause.
Yes, please.
It seems to be okay now, so let's try it.
Très bilingue, Mr. Matthews.
Merci bien.
All
Donc,
right,
Madame la Présidente, je vais recommencer.
So I will start again.
It's corrected, so please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. Thank you for having us here today to discuss Public Services and Procurement Canada's response to the spring 2019 audits of oversight of Government of Canada advertising, which was undertaken by the Auditor General of Canada. As the Chair already mentioned, I am accompanied today by Mr. Jean-Pierre Blais, who's the Assistant Deputy Minister responsible for PSPC's work in this area. Madam Chair, Public Services and Procurement Canada is committed to ensuring that advertising by Government of Canada departments is non-partisan in nature and in playing our role in that part. We accepted and followed through on the recommendation that we should provide clear direction and training to our advisors on how to conduct reviews of Government of Canada advertising to ensure non-partisanship. Today, I will provide a brief overview of the role of Public Services and Procurement Canada that plays in the oversight role of Government of Canada advertising process, as well as how we have taken action to support the goals outlined in the recommendation from the Office of the Auditor General. Communication with Canadians, which includes advertising, is central to the Government of Canada's work and contributes directly to the Canadian public's trust in government. Government advertising can help to convey important information about policies, programs, and services, as well as information about Canadians' rights and responsibilities under the law, and information to help protect their interests and well-being. PSPC provides advisory services and technical advice with respect to legislation and policy requirements, including the Federal Identity Program, official languages, and nonpartisanship. As such, we review all advertising materials submitted and, where appropriate, provide advice to departments in that regard. Madam Chair, with respect to the nonpartisan review process, campaigns with a budget of over $250,000, and I appreciate it was $500,000, I believe, when this audit was undertaken, must undergo a third-party review process, which PSPC coordinates. Those with a budget under this threshold may be formally reviewed at the discretion of the advertising department. Regarding the recommendation directed at PSPC, after a review of PSPC files and documentation, the Office of the Auditor General recommended that the department undertake training on how to conduct reviews, including documenting the rationale for assessments. I'm pleased to report that that's exactly what the department has done. Madam Chair, the Auditor General's report made 6 recommendations with respect to the nonpartisan oversight mechanism, of which one, paragraph 4.51, was directed at PSPC. The recommendation was that Public Services and Procurement Canada should provide clear guidance and training to its half-dozen advisors on how to conduct their reviews, including documenting the rationale for their assessments of all non-partisanship criteria. Following this recommendation from the Office of the Auditor General, with which we wholeheartedly agree, PSPC immediately undertook to create and update training materials and checklists for all of our advisors. This work was fully completed by December 2019. As part of this work, PSPC developed a process map for the nonpartisan review process to support the advisors in the consistent review and documentation of advertising, which was completed in October of 2019. This process map was presented to all advisors to ensure they had a clear understanding of the process and that it could be applied in a consistent manner. A checklist was also developed that includes steps connected to the nonpartisan review criteria. This work was also completed in October of 2019. Finally, the new advertising management information system, which has been procured and is now being configured, will allow for all relevant documentation to be stored in the system itself, including a step uniquely associated with nonpartisan reviews. Madam Chair, these enhancements to our processes have been implemented and are fully operational. Madam Chair, I assure you that PSPC is fully committed to its responsibilities in this area and have implemented our response to the recommendation issued by the Auditor General in this aspect. Our guidance and tools have been fully updated to support the consistent application of legislative and policy requirements related to nonpartisan advertising. Je vais m'arrêter là pour.
I will stop there, so you'll have time for questions.
Sure.
Thank you very much, Mr. Matthews. And we will now go to Mr. Wallace for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And as you indicated, I am joined today by Kelly Acton, who serves as the Assistant Secretary for Strategic Communications and Ministerial Affairs at Treasury Board Secretariat. After my remarks, Ms. Acton and I will look forward to answering any questions from you and the committee. Subject of today's meeting is, of course, the study of the nonpartisan review process for government advertising, one of 5 reports presented by the Auditor General during the spring of 2019. This review process, as we've already indicated, was implemented in 2016. The Treasury Board Secretariat has addressed all of the recommendations outlined in the 2019 spring report of the Auditor General. And I'll just simply review those recommendations and then look forward to your questions. First recommendation was to consider a risk-based approach to identify campaigns with a higher risk of partisanship. At issue in this recommendation is the determination of what is the best indicator of risk. To date, advertising spend and the total of that spend has been the best indicator. After an analysis of the review process, it was concluded that a consistent dollar-based target remains the most reliable indicator of risk. That threshold has now been reduced for mandatory review of ad campaigns from $500,000 to $250,000. This reflects the changing nature of the industry and a trend towards somewhat lower dollar amounts in the use of digital advertising and media campaigns. This approach is designed to capture at least 80% of the government's annual advertising budget. Second recommendation was to ensure that the ad standards documents, external third-party review mechanism, documents the rationale for its assessment of government advertising campaigns against all nonpartisan review criteria. In response, the new evaluation form for ad standards assesses to assess and designs and better document their findings has been developed by Treasury Board officials and implemented in this process. Third recommendations was to assess the appropriateness and application of the 2-stage review process to ensure that this is effective and works as intended. The process is set up to ensure that ads are reviewed twice. First, early in the production process, and then second, before actually going to market. This allows any creative work to be reviewed and modified, if necessary, before additional costs or delays are introduced into the process. Officials found that depending on the type of media used in the advertising, the period of time between the reviews fluctuated. Based on those findings, it was determined that the process was working as intended and did not, in fact, need to be changed. Informed by work on this recommendation, Madam Chair, guidance was developed to ensure departments plan the timing of their review request to ad standards. This guidance was shared with departments and is also posted on canada.ca. The Auditor General's fourth recommendation was to improve how officials monitor ad campaign reviews and whether ad standards is thoroughly and consistently applying all nonpartisan criteria in its reviews. In fall 2019, a panel consisting of officials from both Treasury Board Secretariat and Public Services Procurement Canada began assessing a sample of ad standards reviews each quarter and determined that ad standards was applying the criteria consistently. This oversight is, of course, ongoing. The fifth and final recommendation called for an independent objective review process to receive, review, and respond to public complaints about partisanship in government advertising. In 2020, after looking at options, including the feasibility of implementing an independent review complaint process, a pilot project was established to accept, review, and report on public communication complaints in this area. The public can now submit a complaint online about any government Canada advertising they may feel is partisan. The nature of the complaint and findings of the review would then be posted on canada.ca. Madam Chair, Treasury Board Secretariat is committed to ensuring that there continues to be an independent and strong oversight of Government of Canada advertising. The audit identified process gaps and not substantive deficiencies in oversight. As noted, these recommendations have been addressed. Ms. Acton and I are, of course, prepared to answer your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wallace. And we will now go to our first round of questioning. It is a 6-minute round, and we will start with Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank all the witnesses for appearing here. My challenge with this overall view is in first-year law school, we all learn about Lord Denning, and one of the things that he would say is it's not the biases that I'm aware of that scare me; it's the biases that I'm not aware of that I'm scared of. So when we look through this process, so I understand that the tree breaks out into two. It was at 500,000, now it's 250. However, I'm still troubled that we're perhaps not getting results. So I just want to first confirm that we have 2020 numbers when it comes to reviewing that. Is that we've got those numbers now? Do we? Because this report was done for 2019. Is that correct? Yes. Anyone?
Maybe, Madam Chair, I could just share that the government's annual report on advertising for 2019-2020 is now public. And so that's the most recent publicly available information on government advertising spending. I'm not sure if that helps the member with this question, Madam Chair.
Yeah, that's fine. We'll use those numbers. And so how many campaign ads were reviewed? How many, either Mr. Wallace or Mr. Matthews, how many campaigns were reviewed, advertising campaigns were reviewed?
Happy to jump in if I might.
Yep.
So in terms of 1920, so ad standards will have reviewed just over 1,800 creatives from 33 campaigns.
And how many of them were substantively changed? How many were substantively changed?
And so in the course of that review, there were 3 issues identified of the campaigns that were reviewed.
And of those reviews, how many were done by non-affiliated people who do not receive a check in any way, shape, or form from the federal government?
And so those reviews were conducted in accordance with the third-party oversight mechanism that we have in place.
With respect,
those reviews are done by...
I apologize, but with respect, that's not the question I asked. How many of those reviews were conducted by people who are not compensated by the federal government?
So I would just add that the contracting with Ad Standards Canada is done through an open process in which other organizations have the opportunity to put themselves forward. And so Ad Standards Canada, responsible for the Canadian Advertising Code, remains the organization that reviews within this publicly elaborated oversight process.
Okay, so we had 3 of 1,800 that were substantively changed. We don't have any independent review of this. Do we not see a problem with this?
So to try and be helpful here, the Ad Standards is contracted by the Government of Canada, but Ad Standards is intended to be an independent review. They implement the standards, so they implement the review criteria, but they're intended to implement that in an independent way, and they are not compensated. The individuals are not directly, of course, as you understand, employees of the Government of Canada.
What confidence is I suspect that if I was looking for nonpartisan, I might have a different view of what that is from Matthew Green, from Greg Fergus, and from other members. What confidence do we have the people reviewing this don't have any bias?
I think you raised an extraordinarily good point, and that is that to some extent the issue of partisanship in advertising may be in the eyes of the beholder. That is, I think, why there's a third-party independent approach against established criteria, and we ask the contractor to participate in those reviews against the established criteria. And then, of course, there is, as a fail-safe, and I think as a result of this audit, and I think a step forward is there's a public complaints review process available as well. But you raise an extraordinarily good point that the determination is quite challenging, and it's not an easy task for the reviewers to undertake.
I very much appreciate that recognition. That's thank you. Just a couple of questions to the Auditor General here, or Deputy, I believe, Auditor General. With respect to the lowering of 500 to 250, that wasn't what you recommended. You recommended a risk, and the department has done otherwise. Do you not still see this a risk? And secondly, wouldn't you see it as a substantial issue that these campaigns are often, there's not a tight end and start? Why would, it could be quite easily to, not that the government would ever do this, but quite easy for them to say, it's not $1 million contract, it's for 249,999 contracts. Wouldn't you see that as a substantial issue?
Thank you for the question. In response to our recommendation, the Treasury Board, the Secretary of the Treasury Board has described the change to the approach that they have put in place. Again, it's based entirely on the cost of the campaigns, and from our view, other considerations such as the subject matter of the advertisement campaign or the timing or the audience reach are important to consider in terms of the risk that partisanship might be present in advertising. The question that you raised about the ability of departments to break, for example, campaigns into smaller pieces, could in fact bring those campaigns below the $250,000 threshold, and that is exactly why we were recommending a risk-based approach to the external review.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lawrence and Mr. Hayes. We will now move on to our second questioner, Mr. Fergus.
I believe that I will be speaking.
All right, we will move to Ms. Yip.
Thank you, Chair. So welcome to all the witnesses, and I would like to thank the Deputy Auditor General and his team for reviewing 23 files. That's quite a number of files to review. So, Mr. Wallace, can you outline some of the key changes over a period of time or recent years that has resulted in a significant change in how an ad is reviewed? I think it would be good to understand how we got here. Did we lose Mr. Wallace?
Madam.
My apologies. My internet has briefly gone unstable, and I missed the question. If the member could please repeat the question, I'd very much appreciate that.
Yes. Can you outline some of the key changes over a period of time, recent years, that has resulted in a significant change to how an ad is reviewed? I think it would be good to know how we got to this place.
So the policies have actually been consistent for some period of time, and the kind of core question is the application of a different threshold. As I indicated in my opening remarks, we undertook a thorough review and did reach the conclusion that at this point, spend remains the best and most reliable indicator of factors such as reach. And these are factors that were identified by the Auditor General as potentially important. It's simply that they are, in fact, that spend level is a reliable indicator of the potential impact and risks associated with the advertising campaign. But the policy and criteria have been consistent over a period of years.
So looking at the 250,000 threshold, this is designed to capture 80% of the budget. But what about the remaining 20%?
So the remaining 20% is still subject to review. The originating departments are still required to meet professional standards and to make sure that the advertising is non-partisan. It's just that the amounts are relatively small and consistent with a risk-based approach and making sure that there's no misuse of public money for partisan advertising. We focus it literally an 80-20 rule on catching the largest campaigns. That's an ordinary risk-based approach to determining outcomes. And in this case, just to be very clear, though, the same criteria apply. There should be applied by the departments as well. They're just not subject to external review. If an ad were to be judged by a member of the public to be partisan nature, there remains, of course, as we discussed earlier, the public complaint process available to the public as well.
And how
Madam Chair, could I just add to that response, if that's okay with the member?
Yes.
Just as Mr. Wallace indicated, the deputy head of the advertising department has responsibility for content in terms of policy and legislation compliance. Where it does come in under that threshold, at their discretion, they can request that it be reviewed as well. So that discretion exists for the deputy head placing the advertising.
Because I think that it doesn't matter what the amount is, you can still be partisan. So I'm glad to hear there's still that review. Mr. Wallace, you were talking about the public process of reviewing complaints. How is that going?
I'll ask Ms. Acton to answer that question.
Thank you very much for the question. And so in April of 2020, we did put in place a pilot, having surveyed really what other jurisdictions were doing and actually not finding any other examples of public processes for that nonpartisan test. So there is a form available on canada.ca, which you can fill out. And it's quite straightforward in terms of any campaign that might be of concern to Canadians. And so we monitor that. And I can report that since the inception of that reporting form, we have yet to receive any complaints about nonpartisanship for Government of Canada advertising.
Has it been widely known, this hotline, so to speak?
Thank you very much. Yes, so it is available on canada.ca, and we have, particularly in this year where there, we are seeing visible Government of Canada communications activity. I would share that, for example, on our social media accounts, we have promoted, I think 4 times since November of this year, just aspects of the policy and the fact that there is this oversight mechanism, and most recently about the form itself at the end of January.
Thank you. Mr. Hayes, in your opening statements, you mentioned that there were 50 additional campaigns that underwent a mandatory external review, including those related to the COVID-19, and that the review results show that there are more instances of non-compliance with criteria of accuracy, factualness, and objectivity. Why is that?
Thank you very much, Ms. Yip. Mr. Hayes, a very short answer, please.
Thank you very much. Yes, so the numbers I mentioned there were illustrative in the sense that we did not audit them, but we did look to see whether anything had changed from the information we provided in our audit report.
Thank you very much, Ms. Yip. We will now go to Mr. Blanchet-Jonca for 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would like to say hello to everyone. And Mr. Hayes, thank you for presenting today. And please say hello to Madam Hogan for us. I was very surprised when I heard at paragraph 4 of your notes when you said that the government did not look at federal publicity sufficiently careful enough to guarantee that no public funds were spent for partisan advertising. So you can see where I'm coming from here. And I'm thinking about a very dark time with the Government of Canada and their advertising campaigns. So my question is, can you tell us without any doubt that we will never see any 2.0 type of sponsorship scandal? Well, thank you very much for that question. I would say that the results of our audit have shown that there have been improvements that are necessary with respect to examining advertising campaigns. For example, we have noted that documentation and conclusions and the evidence necessary to determine whether or not campaigns were following the established criteria set by the Treasury Board. Those elements weren't in the document, so I can't give you any assurance with respect to the reviews that were done by the department or by the advertising standards. Well, Mr. Hayes, this is somewhat preoccupying that we can't guarantee that public funds aren't being used for partisan purposes. So I think that we have to remember that there was a commission that was set up in the past because of this problem. So I do have issues, and I'm worried about the present government. You did say that the Treasury Board Secretary didn't properly evaluate or consider the external reviews. And you also noted that the scope can be different when we look at government advertising. So in the present situation, when we look at messages with respect to washing your hand to prevent COVID, they may not be partisan, but sometimes there can be confusion when it's Economic Development Canada or other types of messages. So giving the political context, could you please give us an indication, given what you've been able to see and the millions of dollars that are invested in publicity and advertising, can you really tell us whether or not we can have the proper audit process? As always, we make a selection when we do our work, when we review the risks. And so I can say that now in our office we have a process in place that looks at past audits. Madame Salvay is responsible for that project, and it is possible that we may look at the observations of all past audits, including the audits done now. Well, thank you very much for those notes. And the 4.8, the third point, you were saying as role and responsibility, you have to examine advertising campaigns and see whether they respect the government policies with respect to nonpartisanship and also with respect to official languages. So my question, Mr. Hayes, and not only with respect to the nonpartisanship, does the Office of the Auditor General look at the Respecting the Official Languages Act? For that question, I would ask Madame Salvay to answer. And I think that Public Services and Procurement Canada could also maybe add some information for you. Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. This is not something that we have looked at. We looked especially at the requirements with respect to partisanship. So this is not something that in our review that we noted as a particular problem either. So thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, just to understand Madame Salvay's response, this is not something that they really looked at, but it was also somewhere they didn't see any problem. So was there really any checking? Because this is within the roles and responsibility at 4.8.3 to check the respecting of the Official Languages Act. So can you confirm by writing, if maybe you don't have the answer right now, but could you send us something in writing to confirm that? Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Well, what I mean to say is that we didn't specifically study that. That wasn't part of the scope of our verification. However, what we did note was that the analysis and the advertising, everything that it was in both languages on the website. So when we analyze the advertising, it is always done in both French and English. So we haven't looked directly at that issue, but we have noted that it really was not a problem with respect to the advertising standards and the standards we have now. Madam Chair, I'd just like to confirm, Madam Salvay, you were saying on the website. So yes, well, you also have television advertising that is done by the Government of Canada. Is that also the same place? When we look at the difference in the demography in Quebec, especially, we have a majority Francophone audience, but is the Official Languages Act respected all across Canada? Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Well, this is really not something that we looked at, so I can't say much to that effect. Madam Chair, maybe I could say a few words to complete this. At this point in time, Mr. Blais, can
the Commissioner of Official Languages has looked into this issue, and of course, the advisory service of the department includes looking at this pour s'assurer, évidemment.
We want to ensure, of course, that the obligations are respected.
Madame la Présidente, juste savoir,
Madam Chair, I'm looking for information and data. So with the witnesses there, can they ask within their departments that this information be shared? Because otherwise, I'm really waiting to get an answer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blanchette-Jonca. And we can certainly ask for additional information to be provided in writing if that is what your request is. Yes? So if you could provide us with that answer in writing, that would be much appreciated. And if we could receive that answer within 3 weeks, we would also appreciate that. Thank you. We will now move on to Mr. Green for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to actually begin by building on some of the line of questioning of my friend, Monsieur Blanchette-Jonca from the Bloc. Are the ad materials submitted for review by PSPC and the ad standard only in English and French? Through you to Mr. Hayes, perhaps?
Thank you for that question. I would ask Madame Salvay if she would be able to answer that question.
Thank you. I believe and I think that Public Service and Program in Canada, I mean, all the advertising are submitted in both official languages.
Are these the only ones that are reviewed by the ad standards?
Perhaps I can
maybe get Jean-Pierre. Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah. So let's say a department wanted to do a campaign in a third language or an Indigenous language, they would provide us with an English and French version, and it's that version, and they would certify that it's a valid translation, and that's what we would send to the Advertising Standard Council.
Well, I would share with you, and I would put to this committee, I've seen it in government communications where things that are said in English in Ontario are said a little bit differently in French in Quebec with a little bit of a different nuance to it. So when the proposed ads are for ethnic media, and I know that I hope at least, particularly through COVID and through public health emergencies, we would be translating these broadly. Are you reviewing the translated ads? Or are you only reviewing the English or French translations of those ads?
We are looking at the communication products of larger campaigns, but based on the translation of, let's say, a third language provided by the department.
So there's no way of telling if something got translated into Urdu or Punjabi, or if someone was translated into Chinese, that the person doing that translation may, as indicated by previous speakers, have within them their own inherent political biases. We're not actually quality checking the finished translated product. We're just taking the word for it that it's coming from the English or French original document. Is that correct?
If there is a creative product that is in a third language, for pragmatic operational reasons, the review is not done in the original language. It is done in a translation of that version by the Ads Council. I have to rely on the assertion of the advertising department that the translation they provide us is accurate.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'm glad that we're clear on that. I'm going to go back to the AG or the Deputy AG I'm going to make a statement. I'm going to ask for you to comment on it, that the Government of Canada's, the way that I've summarized your report, the Government of Canada's oversight of advertising was not sufficiently robust to ensure the Government of Canada was meeting its commitment that public funds were not to be spent on partisan advertising. Is that a fair summary of the overall message of the report?
I think that's a fair summary. I mean, we did identify areas for improvement, particularly in documentation, and we made recommendations for the government to consider adjustments to the risk-based approach that it's taking. And I will acknowledge that while we haven't had the opportunity to audit the developments since 2019, there have been some that have been made.
So it seems like the government, and perhaps this is just the nature of bureaucracies, are often fixated on processes and not necessarily on the outcomes. You know, I'm sure through your previous delegations, I have a particular interest in gender-based analysis plus, with a particular interest to the plus in terms of equity. Do you have within your reviews the lens that looks for what we just heard from the previous speaker, that looks for an analysis that would take into account the different cultural nuances that we have? Like, are you seeing that as a measurable, a deliverable, that this is something that is significant and missing? Or is that something that's not front of mind when you do these reports?
So I would say that it wasn't front of mind when we were doing these reports in the past couple of years. However, since Ms. Hogan has taken over the chair as Auditor General, the focus on gender-based analysis plus and the sustainable development goals has been at the front of her mind. And in fact, it is a priority area for our office. I would say that you can expect to see more on both of those coming forward in her future reports.
If I could, given the question that you just heard me ask, is it a leap for me to think that it's a significant gap in communications if we're not actually quality checking and providing a standard to the finished product, that by only recognizing 2 official languages, we're missing significant cultural competencies in the way that we're able to provide oversight? Or am I just kind of maybe going beyond what's reasonable?
Well, I think the point that you have raised puts a focus on how delicate the advertising reviews are, and there's a lot of nuance in the statements and the things that can be considered partisan. From our position as an auditor, we would look to see what the government considered as they were proceeding with their work, including gender-based analysis plus considerations, the intersection of the various characteristics that affect people, including the target audiences. So I think your question is interesting.
Thank you. So we'll also be in the future looking for things that aren't there, not just the things that are. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Green. We will now go to our second round of questioning. It's a 5-minute round, and we will start with Mr. Berthold.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thanks to the witnesses for being there today. My first question is for Madame Acton. Earlier, we spoke about the number of complaints with respect to partisan advertising, and Madame Parton told us that the Canada.ca site, and Madame Acta, since we were talking earlier, I was trying to go on this. I went to the Canada.ca site, and I wasn't able to find how to find the process to file a complaint. So does this site really give you an indication? You did mention that on Twitter there had been a Treasury Board information with respect to complaining. So, and I was able to do it through there. But don't you think there's a problem if Canadians don't have access to a simple and easily identifiable way to make a complaint? Because this government, Canada.ca, it's the whole of government. So I don't think that makes it easy to find the location to make your complaint. Well, thank you very much for that question. What I would say is that we work every day to ensure that information on commenting on how the government manages their operation. We want to make sure everything is transparent and easy to access for the Canadians. So I'm always ready to look again and see what can be done to improve how we can access things on the website. And so I will make some efforts to do so. Madam Acton, I think it would be maybe easier to have a simpler and more accessible process for Canadians to be able to make a complaint, because it's not, we can't get to the complaint process place. So now there's a pandemic and there's a lot of publicity that is being put out by the government, advertising, and I'm wondering, as the Treasury Board Secretariat, they're still looking at the amounts in terms of deciding whether they're going to do an audit. How are the advertising looked at? It is the time of conceiving it? Is it the time when it's put out? It is after the fact? At what point are alarm bells going to ring? Well, I could potentially answer, Madam Chair. So the established process foresees an initial evaluation and a final evaluation. In the initial phase, the department will be providing a complete document on their communications plan, the type of media they'll be using, the communication strategy, the amounts spent. So based on that initial initiative, then we will look to Advertising Standards Canada to check things, and then we will do a second review. But what's important to understand is there's a difference between the campaign as a whole and individual elements within the campaign. So you may have a campaign that's $250,000 where you have advertising would have a very brief announcements that are going to go out on a website, but there may be also a complete advertising. Sorry, but at what point? Will you be seeing that before it is put out? Yes, absolutely, before it is put out. So everything that is looked at before it is put out. That is quite right. Yes, they're reviewed beforehand. So everything that's under $250,000 that is going to be going forward in each department, they have to submit to that analysis, and so they'll be able to. So there's never publicity that is not reviewed. Well, you do have to remember that it is each deputy minister that has to follow the policy. So their responsibility. Question: we've seen in the Auditor General's report that there was advertising that was more risky. So was there advertising that was removed or stopped since the report of the Auditor General?
Pas ma connaissance. Donc.
Not to my knowledge. All of the amendments before were reviewed, and they were fine.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blaise and Mr. Berthold. We will now move to Mr. Longfield for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thank you for the witnesses preparing the work that we're reviewing right now, especially for the Auditor General's Office, the continued good work coming from there. I wanted to start with Mr. Hayes from the Auditor General's Department on the reason for this audit occurring. I can remember we're not reviewing policy itself, but we're looking at the reasons for having an audit. I remember campaigning in 2015 around government spending money on advertising that could be seen as partisan. Was this triggered as a result of a new policy coming in 2016?
Thank you for the question. So with most of our audit work, we take a look at the commitments made by government and the criteria that we can use, and we identified this one based on a number of factors that we wanted to explore. Obviously, the policy that was put in place, the new policy and the new approaches were a factor in selecting this audit.
Great, thank you. And just to stick on this, and maybe over also to Mr. Matthews, looking at the training that's needed when you have a new policy coming in, and then the follow-up work, and now that we're in COVID as well, of seeing that training is happening, that the training is sticking with the people that are tasked with creating ad copy. Could you comment on the completeness of the training process? I think in your opening statement you said it was complete, but I worry about how do you stay on top of that once people have been trained?
Maybe a couple of comments, Madam Chair, and then I'll ask Mr. Blais to weigh in as well. Number one, key thing is making sure they understand the process. So where to go, what path to follow. It's a relatively small team. It's roughly 6 people and low turnover. So you don't have a high turnover job, which would be a concern in terms of refreshing training.
Okay.
And it is a matter of just making sure they kind of use the tools, the checklists. Jean-Pierre, you may want to add some comment in on how you ensure it's knowledge is kept current, if I could.
Right. So it is a small team, so the training risks are small. But if people were to move in and out, we would do the targeted training for those individuals as they join the team. But there's deep expertise there and very little churn. But we do constantly training, not just for our team, but also more broadly on advertising. It's part of our duty under the policy vis-a-vis all departments and agencies as well.
Great, thank you. And you mentioned agencies, and that's a question I had in terms of governance on the agency. The Ad Standards Agency is a third-party, not-for-profit agency, not connected to government. How do we know who's in that agency and whether they're government appointees working in a nonprofit that could weigh in favor of the government versus being a nonpartisan? How do we determine that there is an arm's length organization that's doing the oversight?
Thank you very much.
Sorry, go ahead, Kelly.
Thank you very much for the question. I would just a little bit perhaps about Ad Standards, which was created in 1957, and they are a national not-for-profit organization that has been administering the Canadian Code of Advertising Standards since 1963. And so they are across the economy and society the stewards of acceptable advertising in Canada. And so as a not-for-profit, they are visible in terms of who they are. And I would just say that, for example, the Government of British Columbia in their oversight mechanism also is using Ad Standards for their third-party review. And I'll pause there.
No, go ahead, please.
And I would just say that, since 2016, it's about, it's just under 7,000 creative pieces that they have reviewed for the Government of Canada in terms of 120 campaigns on all manner of topics, from recruitment to health issues, economic action, and so on.
Terrific. And with a very brief amount of time left, I'd like to go back to the Auditor General's Department in terms of the risk-based analysis. Finances being one big part of it, but any other risks that you're looking at in terms of geography, targeting advertising into unheld ridings, as an example?
So I think that was the intention of our comments on the audience and the subject matter. Timing, of course, being a third possible factor. As mentioned before, the nuance that can be inherent in ads can obviously target a population, and that's why it's important to be sure that nonpartisanship has been considered.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hayes and Mr. Longfield. We will move now to Mr. Lawrence.
Right, I'm going to yield my time. I'm going to split my time with Mr. Weber and I'll allow Mr. Weber to go first, if that's okay with the chair.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Appreciate you giving up your valuable time. I want to continue on with the line of questioning of Mr. Berthold, the questioning that he was asking regarding public complaints. And Secretary Wallace, you had alluded to it in your opening comments. I just want some clarification here. I'm watching an ad on television, washing your hands, COVID sanitizing, and in the background there's a green bus bench. And clearly that is a partisan an ad right there to see a green bus bench. Of course, that is a promoting the Green Party of Canada and Matthew Green. That was clearly something that I would complain about, and I would send it in. I guess I understand that I would send that complaint online to who? To is it clearly indicated in the Government of Canada's website that where I can go to make this complaint, and in the process also? So you've received my complaint. Who reviews it and who responds, and do you respond back to the complainant? I see from the opening comments that Mr. Wallace indicated that the review is posted on the site, but maybe just give us some indication of what exactly goes on with a complaint, such as a complaint of a green bus bench.
I support this message.
Very much appreciate the question. I'll walk through part of it and then ask Ms. Acton to supplement. You are correct in that the creeping in of partisanship could be fairly subtle, could be very much in the eyes of the holder. I think as a practical matter, a Canadian would likely search partisan advertising, something like that. The Google search engine would likely direct them to the appropriate place in both French or English. From there, they would submit their complaint. And then, Kelly, if you could quickly review the process associated with that, if there were to be a complaint.
Yes, thank you very much. So it would be a joint working group of ourselves within TBS and PFBC that would review the complaint. We would set ourselves, a time limit within 10 days to review that, and the outcome of the review would be made public.
Okay, and just an indication of how many complaints have you received from the public in 2020, on average, throughout the year? I'm sorry?
So we have not received any complaints to date.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me, just because of the process that you do. So fantastic. Mr. Lawrence, thank you. Please, I'll give some time back to you then.
Perfect. Do you know approximate time, Madam Chair?
2 minutes.
Perfect. So just following up, so in the 2013 to 2016 time, there was 56 complaints, 40 of them with her one advertisement. So it seemed like there were actually only like 15 complaints. We've only reviewed we've only substantially changed 3 out of 1,800. The math tells me, quite frankly, either this government is absolutely spectacular in the one preceding it, quite frankly, it's spectacular at avoiding nonpartisanship, or there's an issue here. Clearly, 3 out of 1,800. These must be that Harper government must have been the most nonpartisan in history, only followed and duplicated by the Trudeau government. Please tell me that I'm missing something here.
The policy was established in 2016.
Okay, so it's only the Trudeau government that is the most nonpartisan in history.
No, that's clearly not what I'm saying. I'm only just simply saying factually, just in terms of the comparability of the periods, the policy under review by the Auditor General, with the excellent recommendations that we have, of course, implemented and continue to maintain a close eye on, is a 2016 policy.
Apologies. But the fact remains, we 3 out of 1,800, we've got maybe 15 complaints. We've got very little changes. Like the math, it just does not add up. The Attorney General has said you're effectively not doing your job. And the only change that I can see of the substantive is raising or lowering the threshold from 500 to 250,000 for the robust review. Like, there's a problem here. Like, can you guys recognize that?
So to be very clear, the Auditor General was, and can confirm this, pointed out there were significant gaps in the process. We agree with that, and we have addressed those gaps in the process, and we'll continue to do that. The actual determination of partisan advertising was not part of the Auditor General's findings or review. And as you have indicated, and I share your view, the actual determination of that will be subject to a wide range of opinions. We are not, frankly, in disagreement on this subject.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wallace, and thank you, Mr. Lawrence. We will now move on to Mr. Fergus.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank the witnesses that have come before us today. I had a line of questioning, but I was very intrigued by how the questions my colleagues have been asking have been going. And I think I'd like to recenter the debate on the question of the organization that is recognized for Ad Standard Canada, and they are considered as a group that determines the standards for publicity in Canada over some decades. Madame Acton from the Treasury Board recognized this fact that advertising standards have existed for forever, that this is an organization that determines, nonprofit organization that determines the procedures to assure that everything is fine with advertising online, whether it's elsewhere, on television, or if it's going to be published in newspapers. So my question, I would like to ask the Auditor General's office, if I could ask Mr. Hayes, if you would answer the question, do you consider that Ad Standards is an organization that is recognized, an organization that is legitimate to undertake such evaluation of non-partisanship, if you will, of our advertising? Well, thank you very much. I would say yes. We do consider that organization as being independent and therefore capable, able to evaluate campaigns with an external objective point of view. But in our report, we did bring up issues with that organization. I would say that the participation in the complaint process of that organization is something that we brought up, and we didn't audit that development, but the complaint process has changed. So I would say that it is probable that the whole process is better now. And for myself, when I evaluate that situation, I would say that there is an external eye to do the evaluations and reviews. Question: do you believe that this objective outside eye, do you believe that their evaluation is credible? I would like to ask Madame Salvi what she could add to answer your question with respect to this organization that has, with respect to their credibility. So maybe Madame Salvi could add something. Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. What I would say, it is not really necessarily a question of credibility, but in our audit, what we did find was that there was little documentation to support advertising that was being done. So it was difficult for us and for the Treasury Board that is looking to see whether or not they're doing good work. Question: so what you're selling us, if I've understood, is not that you're not questioning the work of the Ad Standard, but what you're saying is that there should be a better record of decisions of that committee? Answer. What we're saying that without documentation, it's difficult for us to be able to do a good work. So you need to have the documentation to be able to do your work. That's right. Question. But you're not. There's no other organization that would exist in Canada that would be as credible that you believe that another organization should be used. What you're saying is that there isn't enough documentation, and there should be documentation to be able to do a proper evaluation of their work. That's quite right. Well, thank you very much.
Mr. Fergus, I'm sorry, your time is up.
C'est correct, Madame la Présidente.
That's fine, Madam Chair, I understand.
We will now go to our 2.5-minute round, starting with Mr. Blanchette-Jonca.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is for Mr. Hayes. In your introduction at 4.2, you're saying that for 2016, 2017 is the first time that the government used more funds for digital rather than televised advertising campaigns. So there are activities in line, but we know that the $500,000 that has now gone down to $250,000 has been done. It has been dropped to $250,000 because it's less costly to do online advertising. So do you think that the government took too long to modify this amount to trigger a review? Answer. I would say that this way of using digital media has shown that there can be risks with respect to campaigns and the audience. So if for us, it's not just a question of cost of the campaign. Thank you. My question is for Mr. Wallace. What do you think that since 2016, 2017, we know that the government was spending more online, but there still was a mechanism based on the 500,000, and you're saying that this, since the 1st of April 2020, it is 250,000, and that is able to look at 80%. Are you saying that for 4 years there was a mechanism that didn't work because that this $500,000 was too high? Answer.
Appreciate the question. We should recall through all of this that this is a backstop, that there is an obligation on public servants to not undertake partisan advertising. The campaign should never be partisan in any way. What we have established is not only an existing policy, but a review mechanism to ensure that that policy is implemented. We need to also have thresholds associated with that, just simply so that there is a responsible use of government money. We maintain a degree of efficiency and effectiveness in terms of the allocation of our resources, and that does require almost every policy does require a threshold. The threshold was $500,000. The Auditor General correctly pointed out. Sorry, I'm trying to.
Madam Chair. Sorry.
For making an intervention. Yes,
Wait.
Mr. Blanchette-Jonca.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Wallace, in 2018, 2019.
Your time was up with Mr. Wallace's answer. I know 2.5 minutes goes by very, very fast.
Madam Chair, can you check the seconds? I've tried to interrupt, but there's somebody else is always speaking.
Sure, I can check with the clerk. We are both timing the rounds of questions and answers so that we are testing our understanding of the time with one another. Madam Clerk?
The timer was up, but I don't stop the timer when the witness is responding, so perhaps there were a few seconds lost. It's the discretion of the chair to give those back if she wishes.
Okay. I am not sure what time was lost. I looked at my timer. We were well at the 2-minute 30-second mark.
I had the first interruption I had at 2:33.
Okay. Thank you very much. So I trust that satisfies you, Mr. Blanchette-Jonca, with a number of us having our timers on. I will now move to Mr. Green for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. It's hard to believe that it was 25 years ago that the ad scam, Alan Cutler, first raised alarms about bid rigging. And here we are, I think, in a very important point in time with the kind of spending that we have in COVID. Hopefully we can, through this committee, get any of the shortcomings of this current program with some solid recommendations so that post-COVID, when we look back at this, we will have had a better and more fulsome program. I want to go back to the Deputy AG and talk about section 4.48, where you stated that we found that the department provided no guidance to its communication advisors, for example, through manuals or training, on how to conduct reviews, including what criteria to apply and how to apply them, or on the requirement to document their analysis. So you stated that in your view, this lack of guidance could lead to inconsistencies on how different communications advisors interpret and apply government advertising review criteria. What is your response to that particular statement, knowing that post-COVID, we're going to have to look back on this? And what would be your recommendations in terms of making sure that there's a service standard across all departments?
So thank you for the question. I would note that the Deputy Minister has responded to the recommendation. While we haven't had an opportunity to audit the situation now, we note that guidance and training has been provided according to the Deputy Minister, and that addresses our recommendation. Perhaps the more important point that I'll make is that likewise, it's important that the documentation of the results of their review be captured on file in order for oversight to be conducted as well.
And in section 4.49, there was little evidence that the department reviewed all advertising campaigns against all non-partisanship criteria in a consistent and thorough manner. Did they respond to that in an adequate way?
So that's where we haven't gone back to do the audit work to be able to assess whether or not that has changed. Again, there we noted, like we did with the reviews conducted by Ad Standards, that it's important that factual statements and statistics be supported by evidence on file.
I do appreciate your work, Mr. Hayes, and to all the staff that are here, hopefully in seeing some of these shortfalls, these shortcomings, that we can get this in place for reviews that happen post-COVID, because the volume of money that has gone out is significant and material, and I hope that we can account for some of these inadequacies. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, can I just jump in on that? One thing to keep in mind here is this is a report from 2019, and so the downside is we did have to dust off the report and refamiliarize ourselves with it. The plus side is the department has had time to implement the recommendations, and so I think we're in a world now where we believe we've addressed the AG's recommendations, and so obviously we'll have to keep on top of it to make sure it stays in place, but we think we've addressed the recommendations of the AG quite thoroughly.
Well, I hope I'm here for the opportunity to review that in the future.
Thank you very much, Mr. Green, Mr. Matthews, and Mr. Hayes. I will now move to the next round of questioning, which is a 6-minute round, starting with Mr. Berthold.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would like to ask a question to Mr. Hayes. Up until now, the answers that you've given responding, do they respond to the Auditor General's concerns? Answer, yes, I would say that we have taken into consideration and there have been improvements made. So I would say that I am still somewhat concerned by the fact that there could possibly be advertising campaigns that are not being externally reviewed. As we said earlier, there are campaigns that don't necessarily cost a a lot, but that they are maybe targeting an important audience. Question, Mr. Wallace, a question for you. To be able to submit for smaller ad campaigns when it has to go to external review, do you need a legislative change, or could the Treasury Board just decide to do so?
La question était pour Monsieur Wallace.
The question was for Mr. Wallace.
And I hope that my time will not be counted for this delay.
Madame la Présidente,
Madam Chair, I think that we might have lost the Secretary. I just want to make sure I really understood the question. The question was, what would it take to be able to make a change in the criteria? No, the question is very simple. The Auditor General, the Deputy Auditor General told us that there are still many ad campaigns that aren't subjected to an external review. So what would we need to do so the 20% left would be reviewed? Is it need a legislative change, or can the Treasury Board just go ahead and make that decision? Well, I would say that the amounts that we have now, as we explained, Madam Acton, I just want to know, can you act on your own? Do you have that capacity, or do you need to have a legislative change? It's a simple question. I think that with respect to the policy, there has to be a discussion within the department. Okay, thank you. That's what I wanted to know. Is Mr. Wallace back? Yes, I am back now. Yes, that these problems do happen. Mr. Wallace, the Auditor General was very clear with respect to the other criteria, and you seem to want to follow just financial criteria with respect to external reviews. Would you say, given the concerns that have been brought up by different members of the committee and by the Auditor General, do you have any intention to go further, or is it in terms of looking at other criteria?
Of questioning, and I am sensitive to the issues being raised at this committee. The external review is designed to make sure that ads are fully consistent with the criteria. When Treasury Board did undertake, in response to the auditor's request, a full review, we did look at lowering the threshold. We looked at a variety of other elements. The challenge with the other elements, to be quite frank, is that they are inherently subjective. We've already had a conversation at this committee around the nuanced nature of those elements. It remains my view, although obviously we will listen very carefully to the sense of the committee here, that there frankly is no free lunch in advertising. The best mechanism, the best understanding, the best mechanical mechanism we can get of understanding the reach, impact, and potential risk to public funds remains firmly embedded in the fiscal amount. Very clear, very explainable, technically defensible criteria. If we try and get into other aspects, such as the questions between handwriting or some other elements, frankly, we're introducing a subjective element. That subjective element is probably best implemented by Ad Standards Canada or by those people who were originally proposing the advertising at the department level.
Est-ce que ce serait...
Mr. Wallace, would it be possible
some campaign to verify what you are just saying?
It is, and there are a couple of different ways of There are a couple of different ways, and as raised earlier in the conversation, departments proposing the advertising, even if it's under $250,000, could still submit that advertising to the external review if it was a particularly sensitive topic as well.
Est-ce que vous savez combien de...
Do you know how many of these campaigns under 250,000 have been voluntarily submitted?
And I don't know, Ms. Acton, if we have that information at our fingertips right now.
Oui, on pourrait faire la suite. Je peux
We could follow up on that. I could confirm that for you. So we will do so with that.
Very much,
Merci.
Ms. Acton and Mr. Berthold. We did stop the clock while we were having some technical difficulties. Thank you very much for your intervention. I will now move to Mr. Blois for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. Earlier in today's discussion, we had a conversation around the complaint process and how to go about finding that. So Mr. Berthold, you raised this, and it piqued my interest in terms of seeing what the process actually was. I took a Google search and found it on the second listing. And Ms. Acton, I just want you to know that I have filed a complaint. Of course, it's a test complaint, and I've written so in there, but it took about 2 minutes. So I think it speaks certainly to the process that it is pretty straightforward. I was very casual off the street and finding that on Google. And like I said, within 2 minutes, I was able to file a complaint. So it is pretty straightforward in terms of moving forward. One of the questions I had is going through it. Of course, this is confidential. You know, you're not asked to give any types of information or parameters around who you are. And I can understand that to a certain extent, but have we considered being able to leave some information such that when a decision is made on the complaint, as you said, it's usually about 10 days, you try to file and make a decision. Is there some way for individuals that are doing that to be able to track that through the system such that they have busy lives and maybe they don't stay connected to that? Have we considered that?
I think, thank you very much for the question. I think the way that the entry is on the form is intended to very much, of course, protect personal information should people not wish to provide it. People may choose to, and we would treat that accordingly. What I would say is that as we post, should we get a complaint, and again, I would just say we haven't yet, but should we get a complaint, we would post that review publicly. And I guess my hope would be that somebody who had made a complaint would be tracking for that outcome and would know how to then also get in touch should they request more information.
So just so I'm clear, Ms. Acton, you said that we haven't received a complaint yet. So since 2016, since this robust process, very easy to go ahead and submit something, there has been no complaints to date.
That's correct.
I want to go to Mr. Hayes. Of course, the focus of the Auditor General's Office is, of course, looking at process. You've highlighted some of the areas which, of course, the Government of Canada can prove in terms of its internal process. But just so everyone's clear that's watching at home, that might be watching Public Accounts Committee, there was no founding that there is a high level of partisanship or any wrongdoing in terms of the actual outcome. Mr. Green spoke about this. I like to focus on outcome. You're talking a lot about process. You had no findings to suggest that there's any concerns here by the government.
What we found was that the information available to us when we were reviewing the files was not sufficient to be able to establish that the criteria had been reviewed by either ad standards or by PSPC when they were conducting the reviews. So we can't say with any assurance whether or not there were problems. In terms of the complaint process, while there haven't been many complaints, or none until I guess yours, for a number of years, I would say that in itself could be a good thing or a bad thing. I worry as a manager when I see zero complaints, because I wonder whether or not that means that the process is working fine, or whether it means that either people don't know about the process or there may be problems with the process. We highlighted one about independence and objectivity in our report, and I know that that's been addressed according to the information from the Secretary and the Deputy Minister.
Okay, I would like to move on, but I appreciate that. I mean, yes, it could. Oh, sorry.
Just a very quick intervention, just out of an abundance of clarity. The complaints process that we're talking about now dates to 2020. So there was a reference to the earlier period. It would not apply for the earlier period. Thank you.
Mr. Hayes, at one point during the line of questioning that you had earlier, you talked about, I do have some concerns about more elements being externally reviewed. As has been mentioned, there was 3 out of 1,800 that, as I understand it, would have went through Ad Standards of Canada in terms of being reviewed. But I think it's fair to note, too, that our public servants that are working, they take an oath in terms of being nonpartisan as well. Do you actually see concerns? I mean, outside of the processes that you've handled, surely our public servants that are working on this behalf, so long as they're following the standard, and I think our departments have talked about the mechanisms that they've had to tighten up this, they are well placed to be able to handle some of this discretion as well. Would you not agree?
So I would agree that our public servants have the code of values and ethics for the public service to adhere to, which includes the neutrality and independence. So on principle, I agree with that. We didn't see the evidence in the file to be able to assess how rigorous the examinations were, even by the public servants.
Okay. My final question would be around what is this costing the Government of Canada annually to contract with the external agency to try to obviously keep this process in place? Certainly, I think it's clear that we can do a better job on process. It doesn't seem like there's a major issue here. There has been a policy change by the government. It seems like there's been a lot of good work that's been done. But what is the cost overall to be able to have that third party evaluate these projects?
Thank you very much for the question. So I can confirm that it is $199,000 is the value of the contract right now with Ad Standards.
Per year?
Per year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blois. And to our witnesses, we will now go to Mr. Blanchette-Jonca for 6 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Wallace, in 2016, we already knew that the federal government was spending more for digital publicity rather than television ads. So then in 2018, you knew also even more. There was almost 5 times more that was spent in the digital sphere with respect to television ads or newspapers. However, there was the Auditor General's report on Government of Canada publicity, and then you proposed to the the Treasury Board Secretariat to set up a new threshold, and so that happened in 2019, and so 1st of April. April 2020, you were able to drop the threshold from 500,000 to 250,000 because it costs less to do advertising online, and the 500,000 does no longer really reflects the reality. So you're saying that it's the monetary value that gives you an idea of what the risk would be, and you say that it covers 80% of the advertising budget. When we know that it's been for 4 years that they're spending more online and that the mechanism wasn't reduced, are you telling us, after all, that the external audit mechanism was deficient during that whole period?
Couple of different things. We do very much appreciate the review from the Auditor General and pointing us to the need to reevaluate thresholds and make sure that those thresholds are appropriate. It is not necessarily that digital advertising is cheaper. Digital advertising provides a reach, but it is actually priced. There is a market, and it is my personal view that there's no free lunch in advertising or anything else. The market clears and the market is adjusting. So expenditures, whether digital or traditional, remain expenditures on advertising and remain a reliable mechanism in terms of understanding the core criteria associated with audience reach, essentially what it costs to purchase eyeballs or ears or the ability to project content. So that's consistent across digital and non-digital media in terms of effectively the ability of markets to equilibrate and determine the appropriate pricing of other elements. However, in some respects, digital may promote the use of smaller bundles of advertising in a more agile way. Because of that, it does make sense, and our review determined that lowering the threshold to 250 would be required and make sure that we continued to capture 80% of all advertising directly and have that go through an external review process.
Monsieur Wallace, je veux comprendre, est-ce que...
I'd like to understand, dropping it to 250,000, the Treasury Board Secretariat was agreeing with it because it costs less for the digital and it was harder to get to the 500,000 threshold. Is that correct?
No, not at all. It's to make sure that we continue to capture 80% of all of the advertising being done. So to make sure that to the extent there are risks, and we appreciate that there are risks, whether or not they're realized, whether or not there's evidence or concerns about partisan advertising, it's a very bad thing. We absolutely need to make sure that there is a second check. That's being done through Ads Canada. The question is, do we have everything reviewed and have it go through all of the same fairly mechanistic bureaucratic process, or do we set a threshold? Generally in public administration, we set a threshold. In this case, the thresholds collects 80% of the advertising being done, allows for a smaller number of ads to be done, again, in compliance with policy, but just not secondarily reviewed.
Monsieur Wallace, est-ce que vous pouvez...
Mr. Wallace, can you confirm that over the last 5 years, the government spending in ads has increased?
Mr. Wallace?
Peut-être, Madame la Présidente, je peux fournir la...
Madam Chair, maybe I could answer. It's for the Treasury Board Secretariat, for Mr. Wallace.
Thank you.
Mr. Wallace, can you answer the witnesses or the member's question?
The question broke up a little bit for me, but I believe that either Ms. Acton or Mr. Blais can answer.
Je vais répéter la question, Madame la Présidente. Monsieur Wallace.
I will repeat the question. Mr. Wallace, can you confirm that advertising funds have increased spending has increased over the last 5 years? Yes or no?
I can. No, I can't confirm that directly, but I believe that Mr. Blais.
Je vous le confirme, Monsieur Wallace. Donc en 2016, 36 millions.
I can confirm there was 36 million. 39 million and then to 50 million. So why is it increasing the spending when it costs less to advertise online?
Madame la Présidente, peut-être que je peux...
Madame Chair, maybe I could correct, because between 2015 2016 it drops from 42 to 36 based on the report. It went up from 36 to 39 between 2016 2017, and it went from 17 to 18 between 2017 from 39 to 58, but between 2018 2019 it dropped from 58 to 50 million. So it really varies from year to year. You have to be careful because in election years, there are no ads for a certain period. Well, thank you very much. Can you please explain?
Mr. Blanchette-Jonca, I'm sorry, your time is up. We will now need to move on to Mr. Green for 6 minutes.
Thank you. I'd like to pick up on it. Mr. Blanchette has some great lines of questioning, and I'm also stuck on the threshold. As you know, Madam Chair, I'm on OGO and procurement. We used to be on that committee together. And one of the ways in which we found the public service skirted these thresholds was, rather than have $300,000 as a contract, you break it up 10 times into $30,000 or something like that. So just to be clear, when we talk about the thresholds, is this per company for the entire year, or is it only, because it would make sense that it's only on the actual contract at hand? So for instance, could one company have 4 contracts for $249,000?
I think maybe I could start, but I suspect I'll turn to Jean-Pierre in a moment. It's for the campaign. And so my understanding, and Jean-Pierre, correct me if you need to or elaborate, but a campaign could involve multiple contracts. And so it's the campaign that I believe is the threshold, but I'll turn to Jean-Pierre.
If I could, I'll accept that. Could I, maybe Jean-Pierre would have this question. Is it the case that many of these firms bid on multiple contracts and multiple campaigns? Or is there a diversity of firms for all the different needs?
Okay, so it is by campaign.
Right.
So it's globally, and you look at the campaign. Even though there may be a small, earlier we were talking about digital advertising. If it's a large campaign, but there's a small, very low cost digital, it's still subject to review. And what happens is the creative side is done by the departments, and they may use a standing offer or other to do that. And then the placement is done by the agency of record. And the vast majority of the costs are done by the agency of record. And as you may or may not know, that is done by a very transparent public process. And it's the agency of record that places that for everyone, everyone.
That's helpful.
For all the pub.
So you had mentioned that 80% of these contracts are caught through this process. What happens to the 20%? How do we quality control that?
So again, 80% of the spending is what I believe Mr. Wallace said. But so from a campaign perspective, if you're below that threshold, you're into a world where the deputy head of the advertising department is accountable for the content. PSPC has a role to provide technical advice on legislative and policy compliance, but it's advice. And then it's at the deputy head's discretion, the department's discretion, if they want, even though they're below a threshold, if they would like the review process to occur, that's a tool they have available to them should they so choose.
So is it possible?
Exactly, same standards apply. There's just no external review.
So is it possible, I mean, without an external review, one of the things that was brought up in the report, if I could, referencing back, is the idea, in fact, it was said today that the auditor can only make assessments on information available, and there seems to have been significant information not available. I'm hearing today that some of this stuff has been remedied, which is good. But again, I'm also stuck on the fact that the low number of complaints is indicative of something there. So through you, Madam Chair, to the Deputy AG, how does whistleblowing play into this? In their assessments and in this audit, are they looking at how there's a correlation between a culture which would allow for reporting or complaints internally to the public service versus, I don't know, I'm just trying to get a sense for how better supported whistleblowing programs might provide more clarity or raise more alarms early on.
So I'll answer that question maybe as briefly as I can, because I suspect that time is running short. But the whole idea of whistleblowing campaigns, complaint mechanisms, that is an element that's important to enhance public trust. There are a number of ways that people can bring matters forward, the complaint process being one of them. We're always interested in hearing from the public about matters that they come across in terms of their interactions with government. And of course, there are the internal mechanisms within departments to raise to their deputy ministers concerns about the way that public servants are acting. Ultimately, the question that you bring up might be one that I understand the committee is looking at shortly about culture in the public service.
Well, this is just it. We've had some studies that talked about just the reluctance of public sector workers to speak up, and I'm wondering how we might be able to apply this to this particular program, given kind of what's at stake. I think about Mr. Cutler, and we've seen him delegate before committee, and certainly very passionate public servant, continuing that work on transparency. But I can't imagine that things ended for him very well back in 1996 when he first raised these concerns. I'm just wondering how we've been able to remedy that to ensure that if people see something, that they have the ability to say something. because again, this is coming off of a significant $100 million scandal with multiple layers of complexity, going back to the mid 90s. So I guess I'll leave it there. I want to thank everybody for being so candid in your responses, and hopefully we can provide some recommendations out of this committee, which will help enhance the future reporting back to this committee. Thank you.
Madam Chair, maybe if I judge quickly, that as a professional public servant who is subject to a code of conduct about nonpartisan, I have no concern that myself, my team, the reviewers would feel comfortable and supported if they had any concerns about nonpartisan advertising occurring.
That's great to hear. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Green and Mr. Blaise. We will now go to our last round of questioning, which is a 5-minute round. I will take the last minute just to give you a couple of reminders as members of the committee. So, Mr. Lawrence, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm going to go back to the zero complaints, and I believe that's been clarified to be 2020. Just wanted to know if you've done any surveys with respect to viewers of the advertisements, whether they were aware of the ability to complain.
I think what I would say no, not per se, but it is. But as I say, we have talked about some of the ways in which that complaint mechanism is made known, and I would say that it is also something we're watching very, very closely, just given the still relatively early period of implementation, but obviously given the importance of it as well.
I see Mr. Hayes has his hand up.
Sorry. Yes, Mr. Hayes.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to just make a precision. In our report, we did mention in paragraph 461 that we had received information from the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat officials and PSP officials that they were not aware of any complaints in the period prior to 2020 as well. Just wanted to make that clear on the record.
Thank you. And on the advertisements, whether they be advertisements on the web or on paper or on the radio, is there ever contained a disclaimer or a warning or a suggestion that people can complain? Because that's common practice, like the Mutual Fund Dealers Association of Canada. You put that on every form. Is there any of that disclosure?
So thank you very much for the question. Perhaps I would offer that one of the things that is actually really critical for all Government of Canada advertising is clear attribution to the Government of Canada. And so in the event that someone did see an ad and had concerns, that they would have no doubt, in fact, that it was an ad representing the government.
Yeah, but they wouldn't know necessarily that there was a complaint procedure, correct?
I would say I'm not aware of ads that have that included in the ad content.
Well, it might be something to consider. And also, I'd recommend doing a survey, as I believe that would actually let you guys know whether anyone's reviewing it. Is that zero complaints? If for example, there were no complaints about discrimination in the workplace, I would be worried. I'd be very concerned. Why aren't people reporting that? I wouldn't just say, you know what, maybe there's no discrimination. So I think we need to look at that seriously. I just want to go quickly, and I'm hoping that you can dissuade me of some concerns I have. Some concerns that I have. Let's just say that the government decides to push its tentacles into the public service, like has happened in SNC-Lavalin, or might have happened in the We Charity scandal. And they say, you know what, this Philip Lawrence guy, he keeps asking our officials all these annoying questions. We want to get rid of him. And so there's a flooding issue that's around my riding, and Bay of Quinte has a Liberal member. And so they say, you know what, we're going to pump in $25,000 worth of media to say how much we're doing to protect against flooding in that particular riding, but we're not going to put that money in. Is there any external to stop that $25,000 social media control? Because I'm not hearing any. I want to believe there is, but I'm not hearing any.
What I would say, and I apologize, the audio did cut in and out for a moment, but I would say even that very small amount of money is subject to all of the same protections and prohibitions around it cannot be nonpartisan. And it cannot be, otherwise part of a larger campaign. And it is written, the definition of nonpartisan for the first time is now articulated in definitions in both the policy on communications and the directive on the
I get that there are rules, and you guys have done some great jobs. I have no doubt that that the public service, that you guys work very hard every day to be nonpartisan. But if you were put pressure on and you felt like you couldn't whistleblow, is there an external review for that?
So what I would say is that the external complaint process is available for any ads, no matter how small or how large.
Okay, so there's no external review for the under 250, and so it is conceivable that we could get something out of the door that was partisan for under $250,000.
It's still, of course, subject to exactly the same policies and all of the same professionalism and other elements. Obviously, under extreme scenarios, any of these things could become compromised, and obviously that's where the complaints mechanism, but also the general guardianship of the public service and the professionalism needs to come into place. And I think Mr. Blais has already spoken to the broad reliance on the professionalism of the public service in this area.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Lawrence, Mr. Wallace, and Ms. Acton. We will now go to our last questioner for 5 minutes, Ms. Shanahan.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It is a real pleasure to have the opportunity to be part of this committee, and I welcome the chance also to thank our public servants here today from the Auditor General's Office, from the PSPC, from the Treasury Board for the work that they do. The integrity that they bring to the table, I think, is unparalleled when we look at what happens elsewhere. And indeed, it reminds me very much of some of these discussions that we had when I was on the public accounts and government operations 3 or 4 years ago, that the intent of the legislation and the policy was that regardless of the government in power, that the public servants would be empowered to be able to make those determinations of what constituted partisan advertising and would be able to act accordingly. So on that note, I would like to ask what are the criteria, and just maybe give me a couple of examples of what constitutes partisan advertising.
Thank you very much for the question. So I will just very quickly from, again, the definitions that underpin the communications policy and the directive on communications. So nonpartisan means objective, factual, and explanatory, free from any political party identifiers or slogans. The primary color of the governing party cannot be present unless an item is commonly depicted in that color, and cannot carry the voice, image, or other of the minister, member of parliament, or senator. That's the definition of non.
Very good, thank you. And I understand the Auditor General's point that there is the deficiency in documentation has been noted, because I can appreciate that the Auditor General cannot measure, cannot report on what is not seen. So I would like to ask about the documentation process, both internally in government departments and with the Ad Standards Council. Can someone respond to that?
Perhaps I can help on that side. If there was an advertising campaign, the department under the federal policy would develop a rather elaborate communications plan. And if it's subject to review, we would also receive that, and there'd be 2 review processes. But maybe I can add, and the Deputy Matthews mentioned it a moment ago in his opening remarks, we're positioning a new ADMIS program. It's going to come online on the 1st of April. It's a cloud-based solution that will allow much better documentation of the various steps. So going forward, quite apart from the new criteria we outlined that we put in following the Auditor General's report, we will have a system that actually is able to track even better the ad clearing process. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I actually want to note, for the benefit of other committee members, that something that we were seized with a few years ago was the matter around data capture. That was something that there were great deficiencies. So very hard to measure and to review what you don't have data concerning. And also, I want to commend the departments on their completion of the action reports, because that was another issue that we were seized with, that the Auditor General's reports would be produced at much cost and with much attention, but then not necessarily followed up on. And now I see the action reports that are communicated to this committee, Madam Chair, which are very useful, and we can see the progress that is made or not has been made, and can react accordingly. Madam Chair, do I have any time left?
You have 1 minute.
So my last question concerns that external process. How long does that take? Because I see that there certainly are a number of campaigns that were referred to the external process. How long does it take?
Okay, go ahead, Kelly. All right. Well, it really depends on the creative, and we're bundling, as others have said earlier. A campaign can have a lot of creative elements, from a full scripted storyboard television ad or radio ad to just a banner. So if it's just a banner, you can imagine that it doesn't take a lot of time, and the turnaround is from the initial review to the final review can be in a matter of days. If it's more complicated, obviously, it takes more time.
And when we're talking about time, days, weeks, months, has it ever happened that it's much longer?
No, it's rather efficient. So we're talking days. Remember, there's an initial review, and then so they already are aware of the creative by then.
Thank you very much, Ms. Shanahan and Mr. Blaise. Witnesses, I would like to thank you for attending our meeting today, for the testimony that you provided. We do appreciate it, and I will invite you to take your leave. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, all.
And colleagues, just a very quick reminder that there is no committee meeting on Thursday, but you should have received an invitation for the Auditor General's virtual lockup, which is happening between 12 and 1 Eastern Standard Time, and the log-on information will be sent to you later this week. Are we good? Okay, is the committee in agreement to adjourn the meeting? Great. Thumbs up, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Good job, thanks.